All right, in this video, I'm planning on going over constructivist, narrative, and relational approaches to career development. I wanted to start with the overlap of constructivist and narrative approaches. So overall, like narrative and constructivism is based in postmodern thought. So postmodernism is basically this idea that there isn't a capital T truth, that there is no clear realist-based truth. So previous models, it's like more scientific, that there's a reality that we're trying to find, and then we're trying to help the client find that for themselves and then apply it. So there's a reality that's being sought after and lived. The postmodern approach basically shifts it to say reality is constructed. We create reality. So there isn't this search for the truth, for the answer out there. The client chooses the answer for themselves and creates the answer for themselves. So I think that's the biggest, a big shift there, especially when applied to counseling, is that constructed reality rather than objective reality. So constructivist and narrative approaches to career counseling are gonna, and I guess in all forms of counseling, are gonna follow this sequence of, okay, so there's the client has a construction of reality, and that's usually pre-reflective. So they're not aware of it. It's not clearly like it's not in their conscious awareness that, okay, I have this constructed reality upon which I'm basing my life and my decisions and my views of the world. But it's just like, it's almost like this inherited construct of how they're viewing the world. So then the part of the process of constructivist or narrative counseling is to then figure out, okay, so there's this construct of how you're viewing the world and how you're making sense of your life. And in this case, for this class, for this video, for career, you've constructed a career reality, but then we deconstruct it. So this is part of like, okay, so we need to make it more conscious. What is this career story? What is this career narrative? And kind of break it apart. What are the pieces of it? Maybe you've inherited pieces that you don't really want, maybe from your cultural background or from the larger culture, the macro level culture around you. You're being told messages about who you are and what you should do about your career, maybe based on gender or based on, I don't know, it could be a lot of different things. So it's, yeah, how can you start to break that career narrative down? And then there's this reconstruction. So the counselor helps the client to reconstruct a narrative that does align with their sense of values, and like they're these chosen values rather than just kind of this inherited narrative. So this reconstruction process is a big part of, the it's almost like we're reauthoring the story rather than just having our story authored by someone or some other group. And overall, there's this idea of co-construction of meaning and of reality. So the counselor and the client co-construct this new narrative for the client to live out through their life. And ultimately, the client is honored and prized in being the ultimate arbiter of their truth, according to this model. So those are just, I guess, the core philosophy behind narrative and constructivism and constructivist career counseling. So there's in the Scharf model, or in the Scharf textbook, where I'm gleaning a lot for applying career development to counseling. Scharf talks about Cochran's model and Savickas, Mark Savickas, his model. So I'm going to go there really quick. I'm not actually going to go into a ton of the details here, but I just wanted to go just a brief overview of kind of what the core philosophy that I've just described, how that can look like. So Cochran's narrative career counseling approach starts, there's 7 phases or 7 stages here of elaborating a career problem. So that can be like, what is the current construct? What is your current construction of or story of reality that's saturated in a problem? And then you compose a life history. So this is likely the part of like making more conscious the construction or the narrative, the previous like pre-reflective narrative. So you compose that life history, and that starts this deconstruction process. Oh, now I can make conscious what my story is and what the story historically has been for me. So then I can it starts to open up new possibilities and new choices in the future unfolding of the story. So then, which leads to step 3 for Cochran, is eliciting a future narrative. So that's going to be the, okay, now that my story's been thought out more clearly, it's been deconstructed, now I'm starting to reconstruct the story. And then that leads to stage 4 of reality construction. And so this is what Scharf talks about with the reality construction. Action is a significant component of narrative career counseling. Individuals need to enact a script. That is, they need to try out a variety of actions. So it's like reality construction is like we're acting out this reconstructed script or this reauthored script. We're trying it out or testing it. And then that leads to stage, or the 5th area of changing a life structure. So that might be more fully like, okay, what is the larger change? So changing that life structure, changing the career. What is the theme that's going to be changing? And then it's step 5 is enacting a role and then crystallizing a decision. So it kind of goes from this reflective place to this more action oriented to living out this new career model or this new career narrative. So that's, and I guess the crystallizing a decision process, crystallization occurs when a gap between a client's career problem and the ideal or possible solutions diminishes. So once again, initially there's a gap, that's the career problem, but then their desired or ideal career narrative starts to merge into their new authored reality. So that's one model of kind of how it connects to that core philosophy of constructivist and narrative and that postmodern philosophy. But then Savickas also shares a model of career construction theory. He also has posted on his vocifer.com website. He has a free life design counseling manual, as well as the career construction interview. It was previously called the career style interview. So there's been a different names and changes throughout time, but he does a really interesting interview sequence, and I've seen him model it in a few different ways throughout time, and it's a really kind of powerful approach that he has. So I'm actually not going to go into it a lot here, but just because I'm gonna link another video to Savickas where he's describing his own model, and so I'll post it, and it's minute 45 or minute 45 seconds into the video, so 45 minutes 45 seconds, and to about 1 minute or 1 hour and 8 seconds, so that about 15-minute segment. The whole video is really interesting because he has lots of awareness of the history of career counseling. He worked with Donald Super and John Holland and John Kreitz, some big figures in the career development world. He worked with them doing research through his dissertation. But in that 15-minute segments where he kind of starts to talk specifically about the career construction interview, and he starts to apply it with the moderator. Actually, he starts to ask the interviewer some questions and starts to demonstrate some of the skills, which is kind of interesting. So I guess just really quick, I will give a little taste into the career style interview, which is also really connected to the career construction interview. So for those taking the class, this is posted in the module 5 overview as well. So table 1 goes over the career style interview questions. So there's several pretty structured questions that Savickas would ask, and about, role models or heroes. And then also just like magazines or books that someone would read, or TV shows that they'd watch and really enjoy, their favorite movie or book. He asks about hobbies, favorite subjects in school earlier on, and then earliest recollections. So, and then the why behind it. So table 2 here talks about the why. So with role models, he's asking about role models because he wants to figure out, okay, the ego ideals. So what does this person believe about themselves, or what do they want to believe about themselves? Like, what's the ideal kind of vision that they're moving towards, their ideal life? So it's not just who are these role models, but it's like, what are their characteristics? What was it about them that draws you towards them? That helps you kind of figure out their inner longings for who they want to be for themselves. And then asking about magazines or books, TV shows, school subjects, that's all basically getting into what are their preferred work environments. And that kind of connects to John Holland's Ryaset codes. Like it kind of gets you a glimpse into, okay, what are their preferred interest areas? And the favorite books and movies kind of has more to do with, okay, so there's a narrative, there's a story in these movies and books about major characters. So it's, as it says here, it reveals a major character that faces the same problem as the individual. So it's almost like the favorite book or movie becomes a metaphor for what the client is experiencing. That's Savickas's approach. And then leisure and hobbies, this is kind of getting into like, what do you really want to do to self-express, to show like, what are those interests that want to be revealed, but that you don't feel like they should or they can in any like career-based way. Then the favorite saying has to do with a title, and I guess I might have gleaned over that one. That's I think I missed it here actually. Anyways, that is one of your favorite saying or quote. And that's provides a title to the story, but I've also seen Savickas in the video. He talks about how the favorite quote is also your best advice to yourself. So it's basically the client says the quote that really stands out to them, and then the counsel rephrases it back to them like, okay, so here's your best advice to yourself about how to navigate this career transition that you're facing. And then earliest recollections deals with revealing preoccupations or life narratives that guide personal striving. So basically what that means is like there are these early narratives or these early experiences in life that it's almost like this is the ones that we remember. This kind of deals with Adler in the earliest recollections, but Savickas talks about it like that. Basically, these earliest memories are there for a reason. We remember them for a reason because they're almost like this recurrent process of what we're trying to overcome, what we're trying to, you know, it's once again very metaphoric. Narrative is often saturated in metaphors and images and art space perceptions of how to make sense through story the reality that we're facing. So yeah, I've seen him demonstrate in a way to where the earliest recollection was basically just a metaphoric way of like, okay, here's how I'm trying to overcome my current life situation, but it's really just replaying or rehashing an earlier story that I faced. So anyways, I haven't given it justice, but I just wanted to give a little bit of a teaser into the video so you can see Mark Savickas describe some of it on his own. And if you have time, watching the full video would give even more justice to it. I wanted to finish today just by addressing the relational approaches. So there's in the chapter 12 of the Sharp text, it basically just goes into attachment theory, family systems theory. Bluestein made an article or made a model of relational theory of working. So it's the idea is that of the relational approaches is that career and relationships are interconnected, deeply entwined. And let's see, let me go to it. It's Blustein's model, relational theory of working, where he has 7 propositions that kind of guide the career, the relationship-based career model. And it goes all the way from just like deep individual relationships, like cultural relationships, so macro level relationships. But proposition 1, Bluestein addresses how both work and relationships are topics that individuals feel and think about. Their thoughts and feelings about work influence how they think and feel about relationships. Thoughts and feelings about relationships influence their thoughts and feelings about work. I feel like that proposition is kind of it's almost like an overview of all the remaining propositions, that work's going to impact your relationships are going to impact work, and ultimately, according to Bluestein, everything is about work, or everything is about relationships. Everything at work, it's a relationship with colleagues, it's a relationship with customers, with clients, with the family, your family, and how work plays into those family relationships. And I would even add that the relationship with yourself, your self-concept. I really feel like that's what that idea of self-concept that comes from that comes from Super, and then Savickas talks about it, and further on, that like we're trying to like have a relationship with ourselves, of do something that matters with our time. And I think that even gets into an existential lens a little bit too, that we only have so much time to live, that given that we all die is like forces us to kind of figure out this relationship with ourselves. Uh, but anyways, that's a little bit of a lean into a future video on existential type approaches and spiritual based approaches to career decision making. But overall, there's a deeper career work, or the deeper career work is often about relationships. Uh, so for example, I once had a client who comes from like a very rich family, and he was trying to figure out his identity and kind of who he was, but like so much of his career decision making was kind of enmeshed into this family system and these family expectations, but it wasn't like their negative expectations. He really found a lot of like sources of strength from his grandfather and from his father, and basically, and at one point a family member died, if I'm remembering correctly, from our work together, and that was a big part of our career decision making. That like that kind of shook him up of like, okay, life's fragile, so what really matters, kind of like what I alluded to with the existentialist approach. So the relationships with others, that they're finite, but then also the relationship with myself of what really matters to me really sparks and comes to the surface. So that's where a lot of times when you get to deeper places in career concerns or career counseling with clients, it's because they're navigating these deep rooted relationships with others and with themselves, and with kind of how their relationship with their own future too. So I think there's a lot of merit to these relational approaches, and these are the clients that I've had for career counseling that have been months or even like a year of career counseling work, has usually been kind of spending the time, the clients who are ready and willing and wanting the time to make sense of those relationships. So anyways, those are a few thoughts on narrative, constructivist, and relational approaches to career concerns and career counseling.